A year ago today, the finale of Better Call Saul aired, and I want to take a look at it a year later. The episode begins with Saul in the episode from Season 5, Bagman, sitting with Mike where they are lost in the desert, where they come across water. Saul then asks Mike this question.
Where would you go first, huh? You look like a history buff, right? What, would you go to Civil War times?
The scene's a nice touch, as both Jimmy's and Jesse's last appearance begins with Mike, near some sort of water, almost like a reflection. But back to the episode. The question is really the whole point of this episode. Regret. Mike's response is to save his son, or to stop the day he took a bribe as a police officer. Saul's response is to become a multi-billionaire, which Mike responds with,
"That's it, buddy.
What else?
Nothing you'd change."
I think it's quite obvious in the scene. Mike knows Jimmy's lying, but he just doesn't want to admit it. We see the opening credits are now completely corrupted and almost silent. We even see what looks to be a dough mixer from the Cinnabon. Gene, now Saul again, is running away from the police, and I like the way they do the chase. They make it intense, Saul running back to his house, the helicopter chasing him, and hiding in the bin. But the chase ends very anticlimactically, to essentially say to the audience, that wasn't the point of this episode. Now the episode is very long, but essentially Saul gets caught and hires Bill Oakley to defend him, where Saul has a meeting with the government where he is able to lie into getting his sentence cut to 7 years in total. And during this negotiation, Maria Schrader is there, where he initially plays the victim, but when he tells them about Howard Hamlin, they start to laugh because they already know about it. We see Jimmy with a face of disbelief. Next we cut to Jimmy in Ed the Vacuum's basement, sitting with Walter White. Walt, who is annoyed by the faulty water heater, tries to fix it, where Saul asks him the same question he asks Mike.
You can go backwards, forwards, where would you go?
Meaningless question. Time machine. Look, time travel. The kind of time travel that you're thinking of is a scientific impossibility.
Walter then spells out to the audience this question is about regret. Walt then says he wouldn't have allowed his former business partners from Grey Matter to essentially take Walter's discoveries and make a large profit from it. And Jimmy then says his biggest regret was spraining his knee on a scam, which then Walt replies with,
So you were always like this.
Walt pointing out the fact that it seems that Jimmy was destined to be a criminal, which is not true. Jimmy, now on a plane, tells Bill that he will testify against Kim, which Jimmy is sat beside a US Marshal who has to write everything Jimmy says down. Kim, who now has a job for a legal aid office, where she is called by Suzanne Erickson, who states that Saul has been arrested and that he's going to testify against Kim. We then cut to Jimmy, now entering the court like Saul, in what we can assume is a very flashy suit. It's initially thought Saul was going to act like Saul, even starting his statement with the fact Walter forced him into becoming a lawyer. But then he does this.
Unity. I shot it. Big money. And I grabbed it and I held it tight. And for the next 16 months, my every waking moment was spent building Walter White's drug empire.
Bill is confused and the government is happy to let Saul continue, where he's sworn in and from that point on has to tell the entire truth. Where Jimmy says this.
Kim Wexler. I fed him a load of BS about her involvement in Howard Hamlin's murder. I just wanted her to come here today. I wanted her to hear this.
Then going on to admit he was just as guilty as Walter and was indispensable to him. Saul is then, after an argument with the judge and Bill, allowed to continue. Saul admits that Kim was braver than him. Saul then starts talking about his brother, where we get a shot of the exit sign, reminding the audience of when Chuck took Jimmy to court, and then admits that he was responsible for Chuck's suicide. Saul then sits down, but before he does, says this.
The name's McGill. I'm James McGill.
Your Honor.
Saul has now become Jimmy, again. The court continues arguing. Jimmy looks back at Kim, where she has a face of approval. We then cut to the day before the first episode of the entire series. Jimmy doesn't want to defend his clients, where Chuck states everybody should have a good legal defense. Chuck then, in a moment of rare humanity, says this:
"There's no shame in going back and changing your path."
But Jimmy thinks he's attacking him and counters the attempt at a genuine conversation. As the scene ends, we see Chuck is reading H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. Jimmy is now on a prison bus, where he is eventually recognised. The bus erupts into a song and a chant of Better Call Saul, showing that those years of protecting these criminals, he has earned their respect, and the scene ends with him smiling. I'll skip to the final scene. Kim visits Jimmy in prison, where they share a cigarette, a callback to the first episode. Jimmy announces the fact that he'll be in prison for 86 years, so he will essentially die in prison. And notice the fact that the cigarette is the only thing that has colour, maybe suggesting it's some sort of beacon of hope in Jimmy's life. Kim walks out of the prison while Jimmy looks at her through the prison fence. Kim free Jimmy in prison. Jimmy gives her the finger guns. She looks at Jimmy one final time. The camera pans as Kim walks round the corner, and the show comes to an end. Impact. The show's ending, in retrospect, is probably better than Breaking Bad's. Yes, that ending was great, but I think Better Call Saul was better and completed Jimmy's arc in a satisfying way, as well as Kim's arc, and seeing more characters, and in some ways, a redemption of Jimmy. And now the ending is considered one of the best ever, and I think it doesn't ruin the show, and wraps up the show perfectly. And even a year from the finale, with a less hyped up ending, less ravey hyperbole from the fans, it's still amazing and will stand the test of time, and is a fantastic fitting finale. So, in conclusion, a year after the show's ending, and it's great. It wasn't overrated, it wasn't hated, it was perfect. Saul got redeemed, Kim was satisfied. Hank and Steve's widows got some sort of reward and revenge. All in all, a perfect ending.